places where you're not quite sure whether in fact you are live or not. So I'm just going to blabber for 10 seconds, make sure that it's all working. Looks like we are live. So enough chit chat. We are live today to talk about a very interesting, I think, an under discussed topic, which is life after exit. Everyone's busy stressing out about how to sell their business, and rightly so, because if you can make seven figures and also, enjoy the proceeds in the meantime, why would you not? But of course, what do you do next? This is quite a profound question, I think. And so it's the happily ever after piece that we're talking today um, with Ben Leonard from Econ Brokers. So, Ben, thanks for coming on live. Great to see you
Thanks for
again.
having me. Yeah, it's good to be here and good to chat.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, always educational. So, in a second, folks, we're going to record our podcast as is our tradition. If you are listening live, then I can, by the magic of Restream, see your comments and respond to them or weave them in if they're relevant, please, to the topic, not just of e-commerce in general, but specifically about life after exit. So please restrict yourself to the topic at hand if you would, but do ask any questions you've got either now if you're watching it live with us or on the replay, and Ben or I will try and come in and come up with an intelligent response. That aside, this podcast time. So Ben, are you ready to record your podcast?
Yeah, let's rock and roll.
Let's do this thing. Okay, let's get the camera back to me and then we are good to go. Ladles and jelly spoons, boys and girls. This is Michael Veazey from the 10K Collective podcast, a subset of the amazing FBA podcast family. And this one's for 6, 7, and 8-figure Amazon business owners. Now, today we're talking about the bit when you stop being a business owner because you've sold it to somebody. So, life after exit, really important topic that I don't think is discussed enough because, quite rightly, we're all focused on selling our businesses for 7 figures and enjoying the proceeds in the meantime. That's all very well and good. But what next? What about the happily ever after part of your fairy story? Well, today we're talking with Ben Leonard of Econ Brokers. Ben built and sold an Amazon private label / custom product business within 3 years, which is kind of mind blowing. I happened to meet him before and kind of as part of that journey. And then since has gone on to create a fantastic brokerage with a very expert partner, Alison Walker, to help other people to exit their businesses as well. So perfectly placed to talk on the subject. Ben, welcome back to the show. Great to have you here.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you. So where are you coming to us from today?
I'm in sunny Scotland, northeast Scotland, where
Yeah.
the sun is always shining.
Yeah, said with great irony. I mean, I'm in
Yeah,
London, and that's famous to be famously rainy, but I don't think it's quite as rainy as Scotland. But beautiful part of the world, but not necessarily the classic place for an entrepreneur. So I guess we ought to just quickly deal with what happened before you created your business, and then we ought to talk about life after exit. That's our main focus. But tell me a tiny bit about how you even came to become an entrepreneur in the first place.
sure. I grew up in a small commuter town outside Aberdeen. And for those who don't know, Aberdeen is the oil and gas capital of Europe. And my parents moved to Aberdeen, like many other families in the 80s, for the oil and gas industry. But I developed a keen interest in the environment, and I actually ended up becoming a marine ecologist. And I did work in the oil and gas industry. My job was to tell the engineers that they couldn't throw chemicals in the sea. I was an environmental advisor. And I generally enjoyed my job. But I had a bit of an unconventional route into e-commerce because I got quite unwell with a heart problem. I'm absolutely fine now. But for 6 months, I got signed off work and I had to take a lot of strong drugs and stop all my fitness hobbies. And that was a catalyst for me starting a fitness brand. And that was in early 2016, and it all grew from there.
Great. Nicely prepackaged personal brand story, by the way. Nicely done. And which I think is important for a lot of people who are creating a brand. Yeah. So you started in 2016. So let's just take whistle stop tour of the bit we normally
Sure.
focus on in this show. Um, what happened next?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wasn't well. I decided that I would stay in touch with my fitness hobbies by developing better fitness products than I already had. And at this point, I knew I had no background in business, no product development skills, no marketing skills. And I didn't even know that selling on Amazon as a third party was a thing. I thought that when you bought stuff on Amazon, you were buying it from Jeff. And all I knew, and I think that worked to my advantage, because actually, I think if I'd known all that stuff and had been less naive, I probably would have been scared off of the model. So I was brand first. I wanted to start a brand of fitness equipment and figure out as I went along where I would sell it. Initially, I thought I'd sell it into gyms and probably on my own website. And it was actually while waiting for my first prototypes that I discovered you could sell on Amazon. And it grew from there. Amazon did indeed turn out to be a very important sales channel for me. The vast majority of my sales. We started in the UK. I moved across to Europe. I was one of the first sellers into Australia and then the United Arab Emirates. And after developing a suite of products for people who were interested in fitness, boxing, weightlifting, I sold the business in late 2019. So that's a very whistle-stop tour of the business. But it was a learn by doing process. But it was a bit more sophisticated than just trial and error, because I had an unfair advantage because I have a background in science, means that I understand how to test something, analyze the results, see what happens next, and tweak according to what I see happening. And that allowed me to methodically grow the business. It certainly saved me a lot of money on potential spend that I didn't need to do because I was carefully tracking what was working as I went along.
Yeah, nice. Well, I mean, there's a whole ton of stuff that, we talked to you before about, and doubtless will again, about brand development and
Mm.
the importance of that. And you've just mentioned scientific method, which is interesting. A lot of people think scientific method is the results, like, stuff that you can use like an iPhone. But I think scientific method, like great physicist Richard Feynman talks about it, and it's about questioning assumptions and how you go about that in a structured way. So very, very interesting. But we're going to leave that one hanging for another podcast. We'll doubtless have you back on again because always educational to talk to you, but we're going to be disciplined and stick to the topic, which is you've done all that. You started a brand, you just casually created a brand that's fantastic enough to sell, which is kind of everyone's dream and kind of sickening. So you're one of those sickening people that helps other people sell courses because you're the exception to the rule, maybe. But okay, then you sold the brand. So tell me a bit about what preceded the sale. Why did you sell a brand that was
Yep.
clearly so successful and to some extent sounds like quite close to your heart as well?
Yeah, I'll always have a lot of affection for the brand. It was early 2019. I started to hear whispers that buying and selling e-commerce businesses was becoming more mainstream. Previously, if you'd spoken to the bank about wanting to buy an e-commerce business, they would have looked at you like you had two heads, right? People kind of believe that these are not real big boy grown-up businesses because they don't have physical roofs and doors and walls. And a friend of mine, actually a mutual friend who's in a group with us, had sold two much smaller businesses himself, and I got a bit of advice from him, and I started to do a bit of research, and I came to understand after doing some back of an envelope calculations that I could make some significant money by selling the business. And timing wise, it was quite good timing for my family and I because we were expecting our first child. We wanted to move house. I think I'd just turned 30 or 31, and I was about to turn 31. And it seemed to me that it was an opportunity to essentially give us a great safety net and allow us to realize some dreams that we wanted to realize.
Nice. So I guess it sounds like first of all, it became possible, the business environment. And the
Mm,
second thing is your personal timing, really. By the way, 31, that's also sickening.
yeah,
So,
sorry.
yeah, you kind of hit so many of the cliches of this. But I guess the reason why is because you're very mindful about creating the business, it sounds like, and also mindful about the fact that you were selling, not, it sounds like for business reasons, but very personal reasons. Is that a fair summary? What else was behind the reason to sell?
I think so. It it just made sense to me. We were wanting to start a family. We wanted to move house. And I was at a crossroads. I could either continue to scale the business, and I was at the point of either needing to build out a team locally or probably developing a much larger team than I had overseas. I was working with three freelancer team members over in the Philippines at the time. And I received some advice from my dad, which was sell the business at the point of peak romance. And he didn't make that up. He got that somewhere else as well. And basically what that means is you're at this point where you think, oh boy, this could be something huge. And therefore, if you sell it now, there's a lot of meat on the bone to attract a potential buyer and also allow you to have a decent asking price and allow you to have your cake and eat it by structuring the deal such that you can benefit from some of the upside. But at the same time, it's purely a romantic notion and it might not quite go as well as you potentially think it could. And that being the case, then you got out at the right time. And whilst that is not very quantitative, that is very qualitative, almost a little bit wishy-washy, Um, I do think it applies. Most of what I talk about in the space to do with exits is very quantitative, very analytical, very take the emotion out of it. But that's the one thing from that side of things that I do throw in there.
Yeah, it's
And it
so
just made sense
interesting.
for us.
Yeah, I think that what strikes me about so much of it, as you say, is science, not. Yeah, I say science like the emotion doesn't belong in science, but that's absolutely untrue. From the scientists I know, one of the most passionate people I know was part of a Nobel Prize winning scientific team. So that's a myth. But I guess, yeah, being very structured, very analytical, numbers driven, it strikes me a lot of it's about that. But the decision to sell never is. It strikes me that actually it has to be rationally managing the irrational. But there's even a book with that name, isn't it? I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, there
Um,
is. Yeah.
in other words, you have to recognize that your intuition is your main guide, and then you have to work with that in an intelligent way, right? So, in other words, peak romance is a very intuitive feeling, and yet most people who've run a business for long enough will kind of know exactly what you mean, because there is a point where you're really in love with it, and then you get to the point where it gets to be a bit of a grind possibly, and then you go through another wave, or you don't. But
Yeah.
if you go through one wave and then sell at the bottom, I guess this is the worst case scenario, right? I know other people who are super passionate, we both know, super passionate about building their business to $100 million a year, and they may well make it. But that's a series of peaks, isn't it? Not just one
Yeah.
peak romance.
Yeah. I think you made that something you mentioned there is, suppose you've felt a lot of enthusiasm for your business and you have to get up and go to work on it every day. And then you feel that dissipating. I wouldn't necessarily say that's a red flag, but I'd say that's an amber flag to start thinking about an exit. Because if you, the driving force behind your business, no longer has the passion for it, there is a danger that you will plateau or even enter into a decline that you may never recover from. And that would be a real shame when you could have sold it when you were doing much, much better. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing that I've seen with business owners, one guy who's successfully exited a business, was really not very decisive at all about whether he wanted to sell, actually. And he got
Mm.
a juicy offer and he went ahead. But one reason I think it made sense for him is he's not a team builder. He tried hiring a few people and it just wasn't his bag, but he's very good at creating brands, which is
Mm.
an entrepreneurial type of person. And therefore, for them, I think it makes even more sense. I mean, was that your sense about yourself, that you didn't want to go down the route of being a manager and a team manager, or so much of a fact?
I think that's a fair point. At the time, the whole idea of having to build out a team seemed quite an overwhelming prospect to me. As it happens, since exiting, I have been doing a lot more team building in my other ventures. But I think potentially that's because, when you're at the time, I was under quite a lot of pressure. I needed this business to be a success. I ditched my day job and I needed to keep running it such that it was sellable and an attractive proposition for a potential buyer. And so the whole idea of having to build a team or a larger team than I already had was, probably just a little too much, right? I think my glass was at capacity. Um, and selling the business for a whole variety of reasons, that included, was the right thing for me and my family at the time. And everybody's different, right? I talk to people all the time, all who have completely different, all entirely valid reasons for wanting to sell.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and we can talk about that because obviously you're in a very unusual position, unlike most entrepreneurs who just sell and then move on to whatever else they do, which we'll talk about in a sec. As a business broker, I guess you to see a lot of that process now. But um, so okay, you sold the business,
Mm.
and tell me a bit about the experience of. I suppose we could talk about two things. Look, we ought to talk briefly about the experience of actually going through the selling process,
Yep.
which we have talked about before from sort of nuts and bolts point of view with a ton of aggregators and brokers, of which, of course, you are one. But as the
Mm.
actual entrepreneur, the business owner, how was that process for you?
It was intense, amazing, frustrating, exciting, worrying. Let me try and briefly give you the timeline. I try not to open too many cans of worms. I made the decision to start exploring the opportunity to sell in about February 2019. And I spoke with several brokers. At this point, Thrasio, who is they were quite the first, but they were the first aggregator to make it, so to speak, had only existed since September 2018. So they were only a few months old when I began to explore selling. And the whole idea of rolling up e-commerce businesses was still very new, if not unheard of. And I'd spoken to a few people who'd sold their businesses, albeit significantly smaller than mine, through some brokers slash listing style websites. And after approaching several, I settled on one. And the process of working with them took quite a long time. And the business went to market in September. We got the business under LOI, and the deal was done on Halloween. The actual process itself was quite stressful because the broker I worked with made a couple of catastrophic errors that fortunately my accountant fixed, and that was kind of the inspiration for starting a better brokerage. And then because of the timing, we had a pre-arranged trip, my wife and I, to go interrailing around northern Italy with our 4-month-old daughter. So I was pounding the streets of Venice and Florence by day and having due diligence calls with the various people at the buyer by night in budget hotels, because it was all on the budget at the time. So that was quite stressful. Knowing that, the whole time I needed to get this right because I didn't want the rug to be pulled out from under it. But the deal was eventually concluded at 4 minutes to midnight on Halloween 2019. And the reason I mentioned the 4 minutes to midnight thing is that I became aware that the buyer had a date by which they had to close the deal. Otherwise, the financial analysis that they had done run past their investors was no longer valid. Therefore, if that date slipped, they'd either have to do all the analysis again or just move on to another opportunity and not buy my business. And so that was very stressful. And at 11:30 at night, we had my lawyers, their lawyers, all on the phone trying to get our heads around some very straightforward, completely legit tax issues. And eventually it was all fine. And at 4 minutes before the deadline, the deal was done. So pretty stressful, but very rewarding at the end.
Wow, I have to say that's the sort of thing that would make for a great movie, and terrible actual life experience. They're
Yeah.
always diametrically opposite, right? I mean, functional couples and smoothly run teams at work always make for good life and bad movie. But yeah, that is really quite near the deadline for
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah.
I think what you said, by the way, just to reference that, I happen to know because we've had you and your ecom broker's business partner, Alison Walker, who is an accountant, on a call with in privately talking to a lot of smart people in the 10K collective mastermind of 7 and even 8-figure sellers. And I can attest that the savvy that you jointly bring is really great. And I think the fact you've got an accountant as part of your brokerage is a real plus. And it's interesting that your broker made some errors at your accounting court. And I wonder, I guess that's kind of one of the reasons you got Alison on board, right? We're not going down a rabbit hole here, but yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. So obviously the reason that you created the brokerage was related to that experience. And then that's another sort of topic and quite specific to you. And obviously, that's a reason to trust you as a broker if you're an Amazon business owner. But I guess that's not strictly a normal post
No.
exit experience. But after all this then, so what was it like sort of life in the immediate post exit period then? It sounds like you had a lot of stress and you were trogging around Italy. What
Yeah.
happened next?
So by this point, the deal was concluded by the time we were home in the UK. And the next day, we went out for burgers at a perfectly ordinary restaurant and breathed a big sigh of relief and felt a little bit surreal. And it was only several days later that the initial wodge cash, if you want to call it that, for want of a more sophisticated phrase, landed in my bank account. And I took a screenshot and said, well, my bank account's probably never going to be they're going to see that big of a number again. And it was quite surreal. I was obviously still helping the new owners on a transition with the brand. There were various bits and pieces of admin to do, but for all intents and purposes, the business was sold, they owned it, and now we were into my earnout. And I took some time to reflect on things that I was good at and what I wanted to do going forward. I could have just retired, but that would be incredibly boring. And I played around with a few ideas. I was very good at email marketing. And so I played around with the idea of focusing on that, becoming some kind of an email marketing consultant, realized I didn't want to do that. And on reflection, I basically said, well, there's an obvious gap to fill. The classic thing with entrepreneurs is you scratch your own itch, right? You solve your own problem. And there was an obvious gap here. The experience with my broker was poor. It could have been catastrophic. Alison's got well over 25 years mergers and acquisitions experience. So the obvious thing was to combine our skill sets. I understand e-commerce. She understands mergers and acquisitions and accounts. and has an entire accountancy firm to leverage. But at the same time, I didn't want to give up the passion I got for myself on brand building. So I'm still building brands. The difference now, of course, is that rather than, with the first business, my first product was an order of 500 skipping/jump ropes from China for a few bucks a unit. I'm now developing brands where I'm spending, 40 grand on the design, and then the units are going to be, 35 bucks a unit. And it means I can enter niches that other people can't. And so the higher the barrier to entry, the happier I am because there's less competition. And it's all about building, legit brands rather than things that you sell on Amazon.
Yeah, nice. Wow. You're such an overachiever, man. It's ridiculous. But yeah, it's interesting. So you reflect on retirement. I think Tim Ferriss put it well in the much maligned, but I think still full of wisdom for our work week, which is anyone who's capable of building a business and selling it and then retiring on the money is probably going to be so bored after a week they'll be sticking bicycle spokes into their eyes, which is a very colourful phrase. But I know exactly
Totally.
what he means. I know lots, obviously, we both know a lot of entrepreneurs, many of the same people, and I can't see any of them just sitting on a beach for 3 days. And why would you even want to do that after a certain point? You'd even had a holiday in Italy while you owned a business anyway. It's not like they're mutually exclusive. So,
Absolutely. I mean, you just mentioned something there that came to mind, which is something came to my mind. The author Donald Miller, who wrote Building a Story Brand, has recently released a book called Hero on a Mission. And after reading that, he talks about coming up with a life plan. I wouldn't say I've come up with a life plan, but I do have a general idea that I've discovered I have an entrepreneurial spark. I want to burn through it until I'm, 40, a little bit older than that, and then probably pivot more into my original passion of environmental and conservation causes. I don't know how it's going to look yet, but I think just having a high level, broad plan is helpful. But what's not helpful is forcing yourself to know every single thing that you're going to do because you just don't know. You don't know what life's going to throw at you. I didn't know I'd start a business and quit my job. I don't know what'll happen next week, never mind next year. So having a general idea is good. Worrying about the details is not good.
yeah, that makes sense to me. And it's not like I've exited a business, but I've gone through various phases of my life. And again, entrepreneurial types will often do that. And it's a reality that LCVs don't look, or resumes if you're on that side of the pond, just don't look normal. I've kind
Yeah.
of tried to make my peace with that over the years. And one of the things I'm going to end up doing one way or the other as part of my life is music, because like you have a passion for a certain thing. And, it may be more business-like and it may be more hobby-like. And it'll remain to be seen. But I think that is also part of the plan I've always had in the back of my mind. And I guess that it's interesting that you're kind of going to pursue your entrepreneurial abilities until a certain point, but you're actively, got a sort of deadline on that. It's very, very interesting. I mean, how did your experience of building a business and then exiting it influence these kinds of thoughts? Do you think about that stuff very, very differently now from when you're in the middle of owning and operating a business?
Um, I think it was a gradual transition. As I began to, like everyone, I started and I did everything in the business myself. And I became acutely aware that I needed to um, improve the ratio of my inputs to outputs, right? And I needed to leverage my time using tools and outsourcing, etc., and people who are better than me, such that I wasn't running around like a headless chicken doing everything. And then you can take that to another extreme, like I'm doing now, whereby, and there's a great book by Dan Sullivan called Who Not How. In fact, the best thing about that book is it's not by him at all. It's by somebody else who sat down and interviewed him and then wrote it. And they even talk about that in the book. It's phenomenal. And the whole idea behind the book is ask yourself, well, who can do this better than me? And so that's why I partnered in the brokerage. That's why I'm partnering in the baby brand. That's why, I'm a partner in a fitness brand. My non-compete finished for my first brand. A former competitor of mine approached me and said, Ben, you're better than me. Well, set up a new business. You own 50%. You throw some cash at it. I'll run the whole thing. And so I can leverage my time by simply advising while still owning 50% in what's going to be a great business that we can sell in a couple of years. So I think that over time, it starts with just, okay, I'll hire an agency or a freelancer to help me with X, Y, Z. And then it grows to the point where you can own 50% of a business and actually just have a call once a week.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome position to be in, I have to say. And that sounds very sort of ultra leveraged because you're still using the experience you gained, and in that specific industry, no less than the
Mm.
non-competes over which I'm sure your current owners of your former business are delighted about. But it's perfectly legitimate, and they're doing heavy lifting, and that's amazing. And the fact that somebody would approach you on that, by the way, is real testament to the strength of the brand that you created, because nobody's going to casually do that. Everyone knows how much work it is to run a business, and to
Mm.
voluntarily say, "I'll do that," in exchange for some cash is always valuable, but also advice is such a compliment. I mean, it's
Yeah, but
amazing.
it was smart of him too, because he knows without having to pay me in cash, he can learn from someone who's been there and done it. And actually, I get kind of selfishly, I get a warm, fuzzy feeling every time I have a call with him, because I feel like I'm teaching this guy. So it's great. Everyone wins. And it's all about the win-win.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, I mean, win lose is just not very sustainable, and lose win is definitely not sustainable and depressing. So yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk, if we may be very un-British, and talk about money
Sure.
without sort of being embarrassingly intrusive. What did you actually do with all that money? Did you just sink it straight back into Amazon brands, or is it sort of running your ecom business marketing budget, or what? What did you just buy a house and then that was it, wiped out? What happened?
So I'm not a materialistic person. Um, I've never really bought expensive stuff, and I still don't. There was one exception. Prior to selling, I had become obsessed with a particular American electric car brand. And shortly after selling, I treated myself to a car. And that's the one extravagant purchase I've had. I still buy pretty cheap clothes. I'm a jeans and t-shirt guy, right? And I'm not interested in stuff. Um,
So
I'm
the
more
new
interested.
home must have, I presume, cost you a little bit of money that you were moving into. I mean, was that where a
I
substantial
mean,
percentage went?
no, I mean, we were the new home. We would have afforded, but yeah, we did afford. So we got a mortgage based on my old day job, and my wife's job. After we sold the business, I was able to pay off the mortgage immediately, which is obviously great. Um, and then, like everything else in life and business, I'm very much a believer of if you don't know, talk to an expert. So I spoke to a financial advisor, and I now meet with my independent financial advisor a few times a year. I put the majority into a low, medium risk stocks and shares portfolio, which is an environmental and ethical fund. Just my personal preference. I didn't want to invest in, arms, fossil fuels, that type of thing. But actually, that was a pretty smart thing to go into, because many, many, many new tech companies, etc., are actually researching things which are socially and environmentally beneficial. And so, actually, investing in that kind of stuff is actually a growing area anyway. So that was pretty cool. I was fortunate. I put most of that money in right before the pandemic hit. No, right just after the pandemic hit, so that the market was low, and then it grew. And now, of course, the wars happened, supply chains happened, so it's all kind of plummeted again. But hey ho, swings and roundabouts. Over the course of time, it will grow. Um, yeah, and now we're building a house. Um, so yeah, we're building a house. But again, that's about something for us to live in. It's not about buying flashy, fancy stuff. And I don't put any of this stuff on social media. Um, I know some people do, and that's good for them,
So
right?
is that allowed if you're teaching people in about e-commerce or anything to do with making money online? Isn't it a law that you have to, by the way, if you've got a car, you're obviously stepping around the brand name, bless you. If you've got a car of a certain brand name and a nice big house, isn't it the law that you have to do videos of yourself driving up to your house and showing people around it?
Yeah, it's just not me. The only chance people will get to see that stuff is if I happen to record, like a little kind of Instagram reel or something, and that appears in the background. But yeah, no, it's not. That's not who I am. I'm not into that. Um, and I think people actually like that. I think it's refreshing from all the
Yeah.
BS that goes on.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I was northern tongue in cheek. I just can't bear that stuff, and I think it's a terrible marketing mistake to do
Oh
that, because I think everyone must be totally over that now. If it was
yeah,
fresh and novel 10 years ago, it certainly isn't now.
yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
So in other
Um,
words, it sounds like nobody's forced you into any cliche of who you should be. You've just gone your own path, and as it happens, the money is provided. It sounds like a nice car, which is a classic thing that many entrepreneurs I know like, including myself. Although actually, I made the decision a while ago to get rid of the car because I live in central London. It's so easy to get around by public transport and bike, and so horrendous by car. But that's a different thing again. And then, yeah, it sounds like it paid off the mortgage, which is huge, but it didn't actually get you the house in the first place. So it's kind of, I guess the safety net idea that you mentioned earlier feels like that's the biggest kind of
that's the
thing.
biggest thing,
Yeah.
right? And here's it. There's pros and it's an interesting one actually. When you're working under pressure, that pressure is helpful. You need a little bit of pressure. It causes, there's two types of stress. There's distress and eustress, and a little bit of pressure causes eustress, which helps you to stay motivated, stay on track, stay focused, eyes on the prize. Having said that, when you're relieved of that pressure and you have a safety net, you are then free to operate at your best self. It's kind of like if you're a sports person, let's say you play football/soccer and you're scoring goals, you feel free and confident, and it's positive feedback. Like the more you score, the more you score. But if you're not scoring goals, the distress is building, the pressure is building, and the less you score, the less you score. For me, now I'm free in that sense, and I feel more free to operate at my best self. Having said that, it's still good that I have little snippets of more stress that come along to keep you focused. We have to get this deal done by this date for this client, or recently we had an issue with the baby brand that we're developing, and our factory told us they can't support us anymore because of COVID related issues, and now crap, we have to go find another one, etc. And so that's good. It's about, you still want a little bit of pressure, but the kind of high level overall idea that, well, if everything goes tits up, we're going to be fine. I think that's really healthy and helpful.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think when it comes to peak performance, the biggest barrier to peak performance for really excellent people I know. My wife, for example, is a very fine pianist, and she recently played the piano concerto from memory with 3 weeks' notice, which is kind of insane. I mean,
Holy
it's not
smokes.
her normal job, but the biggest barrier to her playing well was just the stress. Actually, she could do the job by about 5 or 6 days before the event itself, and it strikes me that actually in business that's no different. It's when you got bet the company events going on, it distorts your thinking, I think. And I've seen that quite a lot with my clients. The biggest thing I've seen is that people try and rescue something that should be allowed to die. And to your point of the
Yeah.
peak romance with a business or a particular product line, you have kind of peak anti-romance where it's not selling. There's no profit left, and everyone's bitching about it on the reviews. People are so slow to let go of that, aren't they? It's a strange thing.
Yeah.
Um, I guess that's not really life post Brexit, but I guess post exit, I should say. God, I have to edit that out. Um, but yeah, what else have you done then? So the financial side doesn't sound like it was a huge motivator to you to sell. It was just the right time. But it's giving you that safety net to then be able to be, even in a sense, enjoy being an entrepreneur, to free you up to use
Yeah.
the talents you have. So what have you done, since exit? You obviously started ecom brokers. You started brands. What's the sort of overall? I'm going to put it, sort of try and wrap it in a bow for us. What would you say is the overall theme of your activities since exit?
I guess I have a few hats, right? My main hat, certainly that I'm putting out into the world in terms of marketing right now, is the brokerage. My other hats are the brands that I'm working on, and I partner on all of them. And I'm developing brands because I enjoy it. I love it. It means that I still have, I still understand what it's like to be in the position of our clients, and I don't think I could look them in the eye if I didn't. And the other hat is a little bit of consulting. I was kind of doing sort of mentoring. Now I actually just work with one private equity firm. It's a recurring theme that we're seeing actually in this space, just as a side note, of large, well, actually enormous firms saying, oh, hang on, we're not very good at e-commerce. It's people on laptops and spare rooms that know what they're doing. Let's hire them. So that's kind of what happened there. And then the last bit is just, this phrase is overused, but I can't think of a better one, my personal brand. So, I'm positioning myself as someone who kind of who knows what they're talking about, been there and done it, still doing it. I'm speaking. Sometimes it's with my ecom broker's hat on. Sometimes it's just with my own hat on. And that's, yeah, those are the, what's that, four hats?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like the personal brand is a kind of, I don't know what the word is, Uber hat that goes over all the
Yeah.
other ones. It's all sort of
Yeah.
all one, right? You are one person, and I guess
Yeah.
the fact you've got this e-commerce kind of big picture theme, and then the brands, the consulting, and the brokerage, of course, kind of all part of that, I guess. So yeah, I mean, this is, we could talk about stuff for hours, but I guess we ought to, since you mentioned the brokerage and that is the main thing that you are focused on at the moment, we ought to give you a second to just mention what you do for people. Obviously, you've been there and done that, got the t-shirt, and you still going there and doing that, selling on e-commerce and creating brands. Tell us a bit about what you do for brand owners as their brokerage, with your brokerage
Sure.
hat.
Yeah. So we help business owners, whether they own a physical e-commerce products brand, an agency, or a SaaS business, we help them plan and then execute their exit. Sometimes that means we work with them over many months to get them ready and then take them to market, almost sort of mentoring their route to an exit, really. And sometimes it means somebody comes to us and they're ready to go just about, now. And we analyze their business. We understand it in relation to its niche, what's going on in that industry, any regulation that's coming in that industry, what the appetite of the different buyers are. We go identify different buyers, and that doesn't just mean aggregators. That means all sorts of different buyers in the space, competitors, larger private equity, strategic buyers, private individuals, aggregators, of course, family offices, even. Prepare the business, take it to market, and then hold the seller's hand all the way through to deal completion. Our job is to get them the best possible deal and deal structure. And deal structure is really important, such that it's in line with their goals and their values and what they want, rather than we'll flip your business and have the money in your bank account in 30 days.
Yeah, which I guess is the classic aggregator pitch, isn't it? Not all of them, but
Oh
yeah.
yeah,
And certainly, I know your recent marketing has had you riding in as Zorro-like to protect the buyers against aggregators, which is really fun. I like that. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, great. So, what if people have enjoyed your story and want to get in touch with you, either with your ecom broker hat on, or possibly if do you even offer consulting at the moment, or is it just the ecom brokers that's really the main available thing for people?
I will take on consulting in the right circumstances if it's exciting. It's funny you should mention that the last week or two, because of some changes that we've made at Econ Brokers, we've just hired someone in the States. I've become a bit more free. I'm thinking about taking on one client. So if somebody wants to get in touch about that, they can. My email address is ben@benleonard.pro. But for the brokerage, we're at ecombrokers.co.uk. You can email me, ben@ecombrokers.co.uk. My social handle and everything is Ben Leonard Pro. I'm quite active on Instagram and Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. And Ecom Brokers handle is just Ecom Brokers. We're on Instagram and LinkedIn, TikTok. We're not on Twitter.
Yeah.
And we're very no hard sell, relationship based. Come and have a chat. We'll help you in any way we can.
Yeah, I was going to say I was going to try and sort of pre-package this a bit more, but presumably it's just if you want to talk through an issue or explore whether you might have a sellable business on your hands, get in touch, kind of thing.
Yeah, we'll have a chat. And, I talk to people and then keep talking to them regularly. They're not tied in as a client at all, just to help them. And then inevitably they come back and sell their business through us because we've given them that much help over the whole time without charging them anything for it. We're about the long game. And I know what it's like, right? And if you can have somebody who can just put a different set of eyes on it, right? And running your business, let alone selling your business, is a very emotional thing. And sometimes just having that buffer and a chat with somebody else who can often point them to various people in their network anyway, can just take the emotion out of it and just put some a cold hard look at what's actually going on to help them arrive at the right decision.
Yeah, that sounds very valuable. And I guess that's the sort of thing a good friend would do, and it's the sort of thing a good broker definitely is going to do, right? They're getting that perspective on, have you got something sellable? Is it even the time to sell? If so, what do you do next? Those kind of basic
Yeah,
questions, right? Those sort
yeah,
of things that people always mull over a beer or 10 and at the Amazon conferences. And it
yeah.
sounds like you're a much more structured and thoughtful version of that in a way. So great to hear. Well, look, Ben, this is, as ever, a real education. I know we're going to talk about valuations. I presume you're going to have to dash, so we welcome to talk about that in another episode. But for the moment, I just want to say really big thank you for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom, and also for being a good friend to me in the podcast. And looking forward to having you back at future and see what new exciting things you've been cooking up post exit.
Pleasure. Always great to chat. Cheers.
Great. Well, that's one podcast in the bag. I'm happy to talk about business valuations, but I'm aware we're getting towards the hour. So, well, what would you like to do?
Um, should we do another one another day? I
Yeah,
mean,
let's
yeah,
do that.
let's do that.
Yeah, in which case then just say to the live audience, trying to get platform confusing, and say Amazon audience. That's the one place we're not live yet, although that could happen. Thank you very much to anyone who's watched us live or on the replay. As said before, do pop any comments or questions into the comments on the various social media channels, and Ben and I will try and get to that. Thank you so much for joining us today, and keep watching for our upcoming live streams, the 10K Collective podcast, the place to be.